Motown created a soundtrack that shaped the music scene and changed the world.
It was magic.
And of all the greatest, timeless songs that helped define the Motown sound, there is this one particular special song that always stands out.
Sunshine, blue skies, please go away. God has found another.
The raspy, emotive, and anguished tenor vocals of the legendary David Ruffin, who poured his soul into this track, always gives you goosebumps and a spine-tingling sensation every time you listen to it.
Strange, but I wish it would rain.
While he undoubtedly owned the song every time he took to the stage, entertaining us in the process, off-stage, the heavy, heart-wrenching lyrics behind this mournful song paint a darker, true story, not just about anyone, but about the lyricist himself.
The song was written by a young man that was so in love with his woman. He just couldn't see his life without her. So he committed the ultimate sin and took his very own life.
After learning that his wife was cheating on him, a distraught Rodger Penzabainee, in his sorrow and pain, penned this heartbreaking masterpiece, one that came straight from the heart. And what's even more disturbing is that just 10 days after this timeless hit was released, on New Year's Eve, 1967, Rodger allegedly took his own life with a gunshot at the young age of just 22.
It's a very true story because Rodger Penzabainee wrote that song, and during the '67 Christmas, he's supposed to join us at the Latin Casino, and 2 days before New Year's, he took his life with a shotgun at the foot of his bed. So it's a very true song.
For so long, stones have been thrown at the wife, and how her unfaithfulness caused anguish in this young man's life to the point of despair, robbing him of the will to live without ever hearing her side of the story. In her defense, Rodger's cause of death runs deeper than we think, and that she may have been merely a scapegoat for a much bigger hidden agenda, a theory that some of Rodger's family members seem to concur with. Having contributed numerous hit songs that are considered not only great Motown tracks, but perhaps some of the most defining songs in the genre for some of the biggest Motown acts, The Temptations.
Was a song that Rodger Penzabainee and I had started to write songs together. I had come home off a tour with the Temps. This one time I came home, I said, listen, Raj, we gotta write a song for Eddie. And he said, why? I said, because even though David has, like the hit songs, but when Eddie sings, he goes to the edge of the stage and those girls just swoon. As a matter of fact, they've named him Sweet Eddie. So I said, we ought to write a song for him. So he said, how about you the girl I sing about in every love song I sing? I said, that's it. That's it. And that was the real start of the song, You're My Everything.
Gladys Knight and the Pips, Marvin Gaye, the Isley Brothers, just to name a few, it's quite disheartening and daunting to accept the way this young man chose to sign off. But before we dive deep into the circumstances surrounding his death and the allegations made by all the various parties involved, let's first get to know who this young man was, how he came to be, and why, more than half a century later, his name is still mentioned despite his brief time in the industry. This is the story of Rodger Penzabainee, the genius lyricist of Motown you never heard of. Rodger L. Penzabainee was born in 1945 in northwest Detroit near 8 Mile, Michigan, to John Murphy Penzabainee, a steward, and Anna Cindy, a stay-at-home mother. He was of Sicilian and Irish descent, and not African-American as some have assumed. Rodger was raised in the Palmer Park district of Detroit, in a fairly well-off family, and was always known to be laid back. By the late 50s, Detroit was slowly becoming a hotbed for music thanks to its nightlife and the influx of Black Americans, which brought new energy to the entertainment scene. This cultural shift would eventually lead to the birth of numerous record labels, Motown among the most iconic. So when Rodger attended South Sea Mumford High School, where he would graduate in 1963, it was to no surprise that part of him felt drawn to music as a result. Like many other kids in Detroit, he formed a vocal group with a close circle of childhood friends from elementary school. It was also at Mumford that Rodger met several new friends who would go on to shape his life in many ways. One of them was the legendary guitarist Cornelius Grant, who would later become the music director of The Temptations, and has often been referred to as the Sixth Temptation. Born in 1943 in Fairfield, Texas, Cornelius was a self-taught guitarist from the age of 9. He moved to Detroit with his family at age 13, living just 4 houses away from Rodger.
My neighbor was my best friend at the time. He lived about 4 houses from me, named Rodger Penzabainee.
By 15, Cornelius was already performing in clubs, bars, talent shows, and various events. Within just 3 years, he would be playing with Mary Wells, then Marvin Gaye, before eventually being hired by The Temptations. Getting gigs at such a young age inspired Rodger, who pressured his mother to buy him a guitar just to emulate his best friend. Another important person Rodger met during high school was Helga Christensen, a beautiful young woman of African American and Scandinavian descent. She would grow to become much more than just a friend. 2 years younger than Rodger, Helga graduated from Mumford in 1964. Outgoing and extroverted, she quickly became the center of attention, especially for the quiet, laid-back Rodger. Rodger began pursuing her, and when he discovered that Helga was a budding songwriter herself, he found the perfect plan to win her love. Remember back in high school when we used to express our feelings through handwritten love letters and poems? When we tried to be little Shakespeares, pouring raw emotions onto paper to make the girls feel special? I wouldn't be surprised if some women reading this today who grew up in that era still have those letters tucked away somewhere. This was the case for young Rodger. Being his first love, Rodger went all out in professing his love for Helga. And in this pursuit to win her heart, it awakened the poet in him. It pushed him into new territories, gave him an exciting challenge, and inspired our young scholar and dreamer, our smooth operator, to dig deep into his creative mind, not to just impress a lover-to-be, but to also showcase his prowess to a fellow songwriter. The tactic worked, and when he finally posed the big question to Helga, she said yes without hesitation. However, their union did not receive the blessing of Rodger's parents, who strongly opposed interracial marriage, like many white families at the time.
There are 190,000 colored people in this country. People say that the color bar is beginning to fade, but I wonder if it is. I think if we were honest with ourselves, that we'd admit it would be a bit of a shock if we were told that our sister or daughter was going to marry a colored man.
It was still considered taboo, and those who pursued such relationships often faced severe discrimination, including harassment and even violence, from individuals and communities that disapproved.
I'm unaware of the racial prejudice that exists in much of the country. The Lovings didn't know that it was a crime for a white person to marry a Negro in Virginia. They found out the hard way.
But I didn't realize how bad it was until we got married.
Still, Rodger, head over heels for Helga, defied expectations and moved forward with the marriage despite opposition from his own family. Together, they would later have 2 children, Rodger Jr., born in 1965, and Carl in 1967. The love letters seem to have sparked something new in Rodger, reigniting his passion and creativity. His longtime friend and legendary MOTOWN guitarist Cornelius Grant, who had been playing gigs with various acts, saw this as a golden opportunity. With Grant's musical genius and Rodger's gift for lyrics, the duo had the potential to create magic. And so they began working together.
Rodger and I were always thinking about interjecting, ideas into the show, into the songs. And, so we were kind of about writing about real life,
At the time, Cornelius was a studio guitarist at MOTOWN, which helped open doors quickly. He introduced Rodger to producer Norman Whitfield, who gave him a chance to prove himself behind the scenes. Though Rodger was quiet and reserved, his talent with words was undeniable, subtle, poetic, and reminiscent of the great Smokey Robinson. It didn't take long for Rodger to announce himself to the team in style when he penned the classic "You're My Everything," co-written with Cornelius. How they came up with the song's concept, only the legendary Cornelius Grant can truly describe it.
Well, "You're My Everything" was a song that Rodger Penzabainee and I had started to write songs together. I had come home off a tour with the Temps. This one time I came home, I said, "Listen, Raj, we got to write a song for Eddie." And he said, "Why?" I said, "Because even though David has, like the hit songs, but when Eddie sings, he goes to the edge of the stage and those girls just swoon. As a matter of fact, they've named him Sweet Eddie." So I said, we ought to write a song for him. So he said, "How about you the girl I sing about in every love song I sing?" I said, "That's it. That's it." And that was the real start of the song, "You're My Everything."
With Norman Whitfield orchestrating everything thereafter, the outcome was nothing short of a masterpiece. That iconic intro, so smooth it gives you chills, was the handiwork of Grant.
I dubbed in the intro. Dum, 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 dum,
Yeah.
And so, that became "You're My Everything."
While the lyrics were a deeply personal tribute from Rodger to his wife, echoing the raw emotion of his love letters. The opening lines tell you everything you need to know.
"You surely must know, magic girl, 'cause you changed my life. Woo! It was dull and ordinary. You made it sunny and bright.
You surely must know, magic girl, 'cause you changed my life. It was dull and ordinary, but you made it sunny and bright." The song reached number 3 on the US R&B chart and number 6 on the pop chart. Still seen as a newcomer, Rodger was placed on probation by MOTOWN's writing team and told to keep proving himself. He rose to the challenge, writing early hits like "Take Me in Your Arms and Love Me," for Gladys Knight and the Pips, "Save My Love for a Rainy Day" for the Temptations, and "I'm Glad You Belong to Me" for Martha and the Vandellas.
Ooh, good gracious, honey, I dig it kind of love. It makes my eyes light up brighter than the stars.
But just as Rodger's career was gaining momentum, personal heartbreak struck. His wife Helga, also working at MOTOWN, fell into the orbit of MOTOWN's glittering stars and began an affair. In an era when the word temptation was more than just a group name, even among the artists themselves, only those with self-control survived. Drugs, alcohol, sex was readily available, which meant infidelity was bound to happen. One of the most talked about old MOTOWN rumors is the one surrounding Eddie's long-standing feud with the big boss, Berry Gordy.
Berry Gordy is a man I do not know. I only met him about 3 times. I really don't know anything about him. I just know he didn't particularly care for me. I guess he had his reasons.
Rumor has it that Eddie believed his problems with Berry Gordy stemmed from his trysts with Diana Ross.
Despite Berry Gordy's strong support of the Temptations from the early days, Eddie would tell others that his relationship with MOTOWN's founder was a distant one. And he suggested it was complicated by their shared history with the Supreme Star singer, Diana Ross.
Helga might have taken going against their vows lightly, but her betrayal became a scar that Rodger would carry for the rest of his life. The heartbreak shattered what little momentum Rodger had built in his life. She was his first love, and after everything he'd done to win her over, he felt betrayed, defeated, and unable to cope. Writing became his only outlet during this dark period. Though they briefly reconciled, the trust was gone, and the relationship ended for good. Out of this pain came some of his most powerful work, including You Don't Love Me No More, The End of Our Road, both by Gladys Knight and the Pips, I Could Never Love Another After Loving You, by the Temptations, Jimmy Ruffin's Don't You Miss Me a Little Bit Baby, Save Me from This Misery by the Isley Brothers, but it was the Temptations' I Wish It Would Rain that would go on to be his biggest work.
Sunshine, blue skies, please go away.
It was evident that Rodger's pain had not just affected his personal life, it had also infiltrated his music. His lyrics, which had once been full of joy and romance, now reflected his anguish, and I Wish It Would Rain, a masterpiece of melancholic beauty that resonated with audiences, was a cry for help.
Everyone knows that a man ain't supposed to cry. Listen, I have to cry sometimes, 'cause crying eases all my pain.
Rodger couldn't take it. He was hurting, broken, and the incident robbed him of the will to live. He became secluded, his introverted side magnified, and he sought solitude to hide the pain.
With or with my future, my life is filled with so much gloom. So day after day, I stay locked up in my room. I know
In the chaos of 1967, a moment of escape arrived for many, especially for Rodger Penzabainee.
Over 4,000 anti-hate people jammed Detroit's Belle Isle Park in another example of the recent social phenomenon that's sweeping the country. It's a giant love-in, close relative to the...
That year, Detroit hosted the Love-In concert on Belle Isle Park, a cultural eruption fueled by the youth movement, protest against the Vietnam War, sexual liberation, and psychedelic exploration. Detroit's geography made it a strategic haven for young men dodging the draft, as it offered a gateway to Canada via the Ambassador Bridge, just beyond U.S. jurisdiction. For a 22-year-old like Rodger, struggling with heartbreak and inner turmoil, this moment in history provided the perfect distraction. The once clean-cut, humble young man with an olive complexion transformed almost overnight into a restless hippie. His long, flowing hair and sun-darkened skin often led people to mistake him for black. The shift wasn't just in appearance. It reflected his attempt to shed pain and find meaning in a world that was shifting rapidly around him. By December of 1967, the shadows had begun to close in. Cornelius Grant remembered seeing him withdrawn and distant in the days before his death. When they listened together to the acetate of I Wish It Would Rain, a song Rodger had poured his soul into, Grant sensed something deeper. Rodger seemed lost in thought, as if haunted by the very lyrics he'd written.
About writing about real life, that's why when they came up with I Wish It Would Rain, it was about his relationship.
On New Year's Eve 1967, just 10 days after the single's release, Rodger reportedly took his own life.
It's a very true story because Rodger Penzabainee wrote that song, and during 67 Christmas, he's supposed to join us at the Land Casino, and 2 days before New Year's, he took his life with a shotgun at the foot of his bed. So it's a very true song.
He was only 22. The news devastated those who knew him, and Grant later reflected that while Rodger seemed down, no one realized the true depth of his despair. One commonly cited reason for Rodger Penzabainee's tragic end is the emotional devastation caused by the betrayal of Helga, someone who gave his life meaning. The heartbreak may have been brutal, unbearable, and rather than endure ongoing emotional torture, he may have chosen to end it all. However, in her defense, Helga publicly stated that she may not have been the cause of his death, even claiming I Wish It Would Rain was written well before their relationship began to deteriorate. According to her, multiple factors might have contributed to Penzabainee's struggles: a traumatic childhood injury that left him partially blind and reliant on glasses, the lack of parental approval for their relationship, which left him unsettled. Additionally, she pointed that Rodger grew up with a stepfather, which meant his parents might have undergone a divorce, which in some way may have added salt to the injury in his mystery. Helga insisted she loved him deeply and retained the Penzabainee name even after his death. Before her passing from cancer in 2016, she was working on a book to tell her side of the story and dispel myths surrounding their relationship, something that never came to fruition. Others close to Rodger believe his frustrations ran deeper than romantic betrayal. They argue that he was exploited by some writers on the label, praised behind closed doors but rarely credited publicly. His unique songwriting style, rich in metaphor and emotion, heavily influenced his Motown peers, yet he remained in the shadows. They allege that he was frustrated by the fact that some of his songs were lyrically changed by writers who would later credit them as their own. This and the other reported claim that even though he was being paid a modest wage, he was yet to receive any royalty payments for his songs. Songs that would go on to rack up many millions of sales. To sum it up, all that remains is to recognize that he was a talented, passionate artist and poet who left a lot of great songs in turmoil behind in the wake of whatever happened to him for whatever reason. For all the joy and love his songs brought to people in his short time with us, his story surely has a lot of value and needs to be better known, better understood, and deeply appreciated. That way, his music and his legacy will forever live on.